Heya, welcome back to another video. Thank you for joining me today. As always, I hope you're keeping well. So for today's video, I'm going to be talking you through my autumn TBR. These are all the books that I'm planning to read over spooky season and beyond. I think I've selected the perfect TBR for the season. They have the vibes, they have the spookiness, and I'm really looking forward to these books. So if you're having trouble creating the perfect TBR for you and you need a little bit of inspiration, stay tuned. So first up, I have Private Rights by Julia Armfield. So this is probably my most anticipated release of 2024. I've really enjoyed Julia Armfield's other two books, and I think this is probably going to be a 4 or 5 star read just based on the premise alone. So this follows 3 young women as they're dealing with the aftermath of their father's death. And as they're trying to settle his estate, they're really trying to also settle things in their own personal lives. All 3 of them have issues which are ongoing, and despite the fact that they're dealing with their grief and they're dealing with each other and their dysfunction, they're also dealing with the fact that the apocalypse is looming. So as they're trying to get on with business as usual, there are things going on in their world that they have no control over. And this is the reason why ancient rituals and religion are starting to become popular again, because people are fearing for their lives and knowing what's ahead of them. And this is actually kind of based loosely on the Shakespeare play King Lear. I'm really looking forward to it. Julia Armfield's writing style just gels really well with me. Our Wives Under the Sea was like an almost perfect novel for me. Her short story collection was also incredible. And I'm just really looking forward to what's in store for me with this. So that was a library borrow, and to continue on with the other things that I have out from the library at the moment, I also picked up The Silent Companions by Lucy Purcell. So this is a gothic thriller that's supposedly meant to be genuinely scary from what I've read in the reviews. I've been interested in checking out this author for a while because that's kind of what she writes all the time. She has a whole heap of books and they all sound fantastic, but this seems to be her most popular one. So this follows a young woman who marries into a really wealthy family, and only a couple of weeks into her marriage, her new husband ends up passing away, and she is just left in a household full of servants that resent her. And there's nothing she can really do to change their mind about her, and she's just left in this awkward predicament. But there are things about the house that are quite unsettling, especially to the servants. They are very superstitious of a certain thing within the house. There is a room in the house that behind this door is a figure, and the figure looks weirdly like this young woman. And she just dismisses their superstition initially, but it's not until one day that she sees the eyes in the figure move that she realizes that there's something really weird going on within this house. So that sounds like the perfect setup for a gothic novel. I'm really trying to read more kind of modern gothic stuff because I feel like I've read a lot of the old stuff and the classics, and I'm really stuck in my ways about saying like they're classics for a reason and all that sort of thing. And I can be very dismissive towards modern works, but you know, if I enjoy this, then I have a barrage of books to delve into from this author. So fingers crossed that this is going to be good. Another incredibly anticipated book for me, which is a book that I've been meaning to read for years now that I finally got my hands on, is Between Two Fires by Christopher Ballman. So this follows a knight, a disgraced knight, and I guess it's kind of like a redemption story for him. And it's set in the year of 1348, and he stumbles into this abandoned village and he discovers a young girl who's been orphaned by the plague. And this young girl informs him that there is a much bigger story going on than just this plague. This plague is only the beginnings of what's about to happen. She informs him of a battle between heaven and hell, and he plays a crucial role in this as he is tasked with guiding this young girl across this hellscape of a land. She believes that she has seen visions of God, and she believes that she's been tasked with traveling across this land in order to confront the evil eye which has destroyed the earth. This sounds like an adventure story, a redemption story. It has been compared to the Souls games, and I'm a big fan of that style of game and that kind of aesthetic and stuff, so I'm really looking forward to this. I have seen nothing but incredible reviews about it, and I don't believe I've read any medieval horror before, so this is going to be a first, and hopefully I've got a new subgenre to really enjoy. Then I have Eyes, Guts, Throat, Bones by Moira Foley. This is a short story collection, And this was very much so a cover buy. Like, I'm not afraid to admit it. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's intriguing. And once I read the synopsis on the back, it seems to be very female focused horror short stories. But one particular story in this really caught my eye because it centers around the ghost of Stephen Gately from Boyzone, basically haunting someone and just continually reading the ingredients on a ham and cheese sandwich. Stephen Gately was my favorite member of Boyzone. I absolutely loved him. I was convinced I was going to marry him when I was like 4 years old, not knowing what I know now. But his death really kind of impacted me because it was just so sudden and out of the blue and so sad. So the fact that he's getting a bit of recognition within this, I'm like, yes. Then the next book I'm planning to read is Thistlefoot by Jenna Rose Northcott. This is a story following some estranged siblings who are living in America who discover that they have been given an inheritance from their home in Russia. And it's really not what they're expecting. And the thing is that these siblings have been estranged for years. They do not get along. But finding out about this inheritance brings them back together. And the inheritance is basically a sentient house on chicken legs. And it's not what they're expecting at all. I don't know if you can really flip an old house like that. You know, it would have a very niche buyer market, I would say. So despite the weirdness of this house, it actually brings along with it something really dark and sinister. A figure referred to as the Long Shadow Man, who just plans to follow these siblings and cause as much destruction as possible. And it just really sounds like it's going to have those kind of dark, folky, fairy tale vibes that I'm really into at the moment. Like, if you told me like 10 years ago that I would be someone who gets really into fairy tale retellings, I would have just laughed in your face because I always just kind of dismissed that as being kind of childish and stuff. But like, ever since I read The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter, I've been like, take my money. I'm so in. I love this. So I'm really looking forward to this. I have purposely not really dug into the reviews about it because I kind of want to go in a bit blind. But I'm hoping it's going to be good. The next book I have is Captain Blood by Raphael Sabatini. So this is a story that has been compared to The Count of Monte Cristo multiple times, and The Count of Monte Cristo is my all-time favorite book if you didn't know. And when you hear the plot synopsis, you'll be able to see why it's compared to it so much. So this is the first book in a trilogy, but you can read it as a standalone, which I'm planning to do because I haven't seen great things said about the other two books in the series. But this was published in 1922, and it follows a man who's been accused of a crime that he didn't commit. And as his punishment, he is sent away to work as a slave for 10 years. He ends up being able to escape, and he takes on a new life as a captain of a pirate ship. And his main goal is that he ends up clearing his name and being able to go back to his life before in England. But it very much is the story of revenge, the story of redemption. And I haven't really seen anyone talk about this on BookTube or in like online bookish spaces and stuff. So I'm really curious to learn if it is genuinely kind of similar to Count of Monte Cristo, or if it's just because of that loose synopsis that's quite similar. This book has been sitting on my bookshelf for probably a year or two now, and I feel like that's long enough, and I do really want to get into it. Like, my interest has not dwindled whatsoever, so I'm looking forward to getting into this. Another book I'm really, really looking forward to, and I purposely held off to read over this autumn period, is The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. This follows a young woman who is exploring her father's library after he's passed away, and she discovers a book or a journal of sorts that is filled with letters that are addressed to my dear and unfortunate successor. And as she starts to read these letters, she realizes that her father isn't the person that she thought he was, and that he may actually be involved in her mother's disappearance. So these letters lead her down the path of learning about Vlad the Impaler, who was the inspiration for Dracula. And she starts to wonder whether these are really just myths and legends, or whether there's something more to them that her father was involved with. This sounds like it's going to be, I was going to say the perfect Dracula knockoff. I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, but I just mean that I love stories that are inspired by Dracula, and I feel like the trickle-down effect of other people's kind of reimaginings or retellings of that tale, or just using that as the base of their inspiration for their stories, has just been so fascinating. And I'm really hoping that this delivers on the vibes that I'm particularly looking for, because I read the S.T. Gibson book, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, last year, and I ended up being really disappointed by that. And I feel like that was incredibly overhyped, just did not deliver on like the atmosphere and the vibe that I was particularly looking for. And I think that's what led to me being so disappointed by it and being so like, why the fuck is everyone gushing about this book? So I'm hoping that this will be able to deliver, especially to my high standards when it comes to Dracula. The next book that I'm aiming to read over autumn, which I say aiming because I have very high hopes for, it is a very chunky book, and I'm already adding to my already ongoing chunky TBR that I have for the year, but it is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. So I read this author's other book last year, Piranesi, and I absolutely adored it. It was a 5-star read for me, and I've always seen people gush about this online for years, but I've always been a little bit intimidated because it's over 1,000 pages. But after reading that book and just gelling so well with her writing style and her beautiful prose and just her storytelling, I'm like, okay, I need to get into this. And I feel like the autumn season is the perfect time to get into this because it's set in Georgian era England as they're at war with Napoleon. And scholars believe that magicians are a thing of the past, but they end up discovering that one is still alive and well and very capable of casting magic, Mr. Norrell. So he ends up helping the British Empire in their fight against France, and he just leaves people aghast with his magical abilities until one day when he's challenged by a young novice, Jonathan Strange. And Jonathan Strange is everything that Mr. Norrell is not. He's young, he's charismatic, he's very confident, and the two end up battling against one another. That puts the battle between England and France to shame, and the whole of the country is just captivated by it. But the thing is that the two of them are dabbling in the dark arts in a way that they shouldn't be doing, and they have the potential to cause so much more damage than just the original war. So this sounds like it's going to be an epic, fantastical read. I'm really looking forward to it. This is like the book that I'm hoping will bring like the real kind of like magic-y vibes. It sounds like it's going to be something that I can really get myself invested in the characters and the ongoing story. And I'm really hoping that this is going to be a 5-star read. Fingers crossed. Keep your fingers crossed for me, lads. I always find that this time of the year I tend to reboot my Netflix subscription and just binge on like the true crime documentaries that I've missed out on over the last year. And I feel like this book, it has those types of vibes that I'm really kind of craving at the moment. It is Children of Red Peak by Craig DeLuey. I'm pretty sure I featured this in a TBR last year, never got around to it, so I'm starting afresh this year. So this book follows a group of survivors who as children were raised in a religious cult in their end days in isolation on this mountain peak. And they have no memory of their final day within this cult, but it has left a lasting effect of childhood trauma. And when one of the other survivors ends up taking their own life, they realize that they can't really put the past behind them until they confront what it is that's left there on this mountainside to try to discover what it is that happened to them when they were so young and what it is that they have been harboring within themselves. And it's basically them trying to deal with their childhood trauma in order to live kind of normal lives. But it sounds like it's going to be incredibly dark and brutal. You can't really escape that. It's going to be hard hitting. It's going to probably be a book that I will be thinking about if it's written well. Hopefully it's going to be a book that I'm going to be thinking about for a good while after I finish it. Keeping with the weird spooky vibes, I'm also planning on reading Dark Matter, A Ghost Story by Michelle Paver. I have seen that people have talked about this author quite a lot online, and they say that you either read this book or her other book, which I can't remember the name of off the top of my head. I think it's like Into Thin Air or something like that. Because they are very similar as they both deal with kind of like expeditions and stuff. I decided to pick this up purely because it was like $4.99 new in chapters, and I was like, that is the sign that I need to finally jump into reading this author's works. So this book is set in 1937 and it follows a very poor English young man as he's hoping that he's on the brink of changing his life. He's just been waiting for a moment, waiting for someone to give him a chance in order to get him out of the situation that he's currently in. And when he learns of an expedition to the Arctic, he decides that this is what he's been waiting for. So he gets onto the trip and a group of 9 men and 8 huskies end up departing from Norway in order to carry out this expedition. But as they reach their destination and make camp in a supposedly unsettled bay, people end up starting to go missing and things start to go terribly wrong. He realizes that this bay may actually have something there, a darkness that's creeping in, some sort of horrible thing that is going to pick them off one by one. This sounds like it's going to be good fun. I love a good ghost story. I'm hoping that this has like those dark, eerie vibes and that I can really picture myself, you know, on this boat with these men and, you know, seeing their fear come to life. I probably will compare this to The Terror by Dan Simmons because I feel like that's the only kind of like expedition book that I've read that I've absolutely adored. This book has to really impress me in order to get on the level with The Terror. A little bit of a change of pace now, but I'm also planning on reading Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This is obviously a very much beloved cozy fantasy story, and I feel like I'm going to need it. I'm planning to read it probably in the first week of November because I'm planning to read nothing but horror for the entirety of October. And I feel like this is just going to, you know, this is me coming up for air basically and reading something that I'm not going to have to put too much thought into, something that has low stakes and that I'm just going to be able to enjoy for what it is. So this follows a warrior named Viv, and she's decided to hang up her sword and open a coffee shop. And she just wants a quieter life. But the thing is, nobody actually knows what coffee is. So, you know, that's her first issue. But also her life as a warrior is really kind of knocking at her door, and there's people in her life that she used to know who just aren't seeming to let her live her new life and want her back doing what they believe she's best at. So like I said, this just sounds like something cozy, something that I can just read, enjoy for what it is. Another book that I'm really looking forward to getting into this season is The Library at Mount Char by Scott Hawkins. So I have seen this do the rounds and I've always been really interested on how people discuss it after they've read it. I feel like people always have a bit of a hard time discussing it, and it really reminds me of how people will talk about House of Leaves. So just for that comparison in my head alone, I'm planning to read this. So this follows a girl named Caroline, and she is taken by a man who is referred to thereafter as father. And she and her adopted siblings are basically brought to his abode and are raised by him in his customs and rituals. And he has this library where they are basically studying for what? I'm not quite sure. But one day, father goes missing. They believe that father may actually be a god. And what's really important about this is that the word has actually gotten out that father is missing, and there are others who are going to try and take over the library in order to find the source of father's power. These kids have a lot on their hands. And this just sounds interesting. Are people being vague about it on purpose, or is it really a lot to try to handle and to comprehend, you know? So it's piqued my interest. I'm looking forward to cracking into it. And finally, the last book that I'm looking forward to getting into for my autumn TBR is The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. This is the first book I bought once I finished my book buying ban. I picked it up in chapters. I was specifically looking for this edition because I don't know what it is with like Grady Hendrix books, but in Ireland in general, a lot of the time we don't get hardback novels, we'll get large paperbacks. And there was only a large paperback of this available for like the last couple of years. And I've been looking for just a smaller one. This isn't the same size as just a regular paperback, but it's pretty close. And I preferred this cover as well. This is probably my most anticipated Grady Hendrix read. I think I've read 3 books from him now, and I've enjoyed them all. But it seems that this is like really highly thought of within the fandom of Grady Hendrix. So this is set in the 90s, and it follows a group of women who run a book club and participate in a book club. And they don't really read books in this book club. It's more so as a reasoning to get out of the house, get away from the kids, and just talk about true crime and thrillers and stuff like that. And one day, a mysterious stranger moves to town, and then children start to go missing. And these women realize that this stranger might actually just be a blood-sucking vampire, and they need to protect their town and their children from this creature. So this just sounds like it's going to be a whole heap of fun. What I really enjoy about Grady Hendrix' writing is that I feel like he writes women really well, like women of all ages as well. So I'm really interested in that. I feel like, again, it's going to be more of the same of like stuff that I've enjoyed from his other books. I feel like this is going to hopefully be my new favorite of his. So those are all the books that I'm planning on reading over autumn. If you've read any of them, obviously leave your thoughts below if you feel like there's anything I've left out or that I need to know about them. And of course, let me know what you're planning to read yourself over the autumn period. I feel like there's always like such high anticipation, probably because autumn is such a kind of romanticized season, but I feel like we always put so much pressure on ourselves to have like the perfect autumn TBR and stuff. And like I said, I think mine's pretty perfect, but like, you know, give us your thoughts below. I will take no criticism on this list. I feel like every book I selected is perfect. If you want to keep up with me outside of YouTube, you can always follow me on Instagram and TikTok, where I make short form bookish content that I don't necessarily share over here. And I'm planning to be quite active on my TikTok over the month of October, so look out for that. And if you haven't done so already, feel free to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and I am very appreciative of it, especially if you want to see more videos with these types of books in them. And as always, I hope you enjoyed this video and I will talk to you soon. Goodbye.